So the other day I met with one of my friends and she said she's just been feeling like she really sucks at Mandarin. So she's been learning Mandarin for a few years now on and off, and every time she tries to have a conversation with the native speakers, it just feels like there's this mind block. She can't really get out what she's trying to express in the language, and sometimes she feels that she can't really understand what the native speakers are saying back to her, and she's just been feeling really down and low about it. So I sat down with her and we had a conversation for a period of time. We outlined her goals, we set a framework, and we set some habits to replace her previous bad habits in order to establish a clear routine to help her reach her Mandarin goals in the shortest amount of time as possible. And in this video I'm going to be sharing exactly the framework that I use to help her get back on track so that you can use it too. So the first thing we did was we sat down and I asked her a really simple question. In an ideal world, in 5 years' time, if your Mandarin learning went really smoothly, what would you be able to do in the language? And her response was actually quite simple, really. She said, I just want to be able to have conversations about topics that matter to me, about my interests, and to be able to make friends in the language and not really have a language barrier as such with anyone who speaks Mandarin as their native tongue. And she said, Will, I've seen you interact with native speakers, I've seen you having conversations in the language, and I've seen your videos on YouTube, and I'd like to be able to do similar things to what you're doing. That's my 5-year goal. So from her answer to that simple question, it was very clear of where we were going, where we were aiming with her Mandarin learning. And so the next question I asked was, what's stopping you from reaching those goals? What problems are you having in Mandarin that are stopping you from achieving those goals? Why can't you have a fluent conversation in the language? And she was able to identify 2 specific barriers which were holding her back. Firstly, she was struggling to recall phrases and vocabulary when she needed to in conversation. She'd have a conversation with a native speaker and then she'd just forget what she wanted to say, or like just not have the right way of expressing it and not be able to recall the things that she needed. And secondly, her grammar's a bit off, is the way that she said it to me. Every time she'd have a conversation with a native speaker, the more brutally honest of her language partners and tutors would be like, hang on a second, like that doesn't sound very native. And she really wanted to fix this so that she could be understood more easily, and also to just have a kind of better communication ability in the language by fixing her grammar. So having clarified her goals and also the barriers that were stopping her from reaching those goals, I then asked her a third question, which was, what are you doing to achieve those goals now? What does your daily routine look like? So we sat down and we audited her daily routine. And this is what it was like. So she told me that she spent about half an hour a day reading in Mandarin. Now what that would look like in terms of the breakdown was 10 minutes of graded readers that she really enjoyed and that she was quite getting into, that were kind of at the right level for her as an intermediate learner. And then a further 20 minutes to half an hour was spent kind of trawling through higher level material designed for native speakers, like news articles, because she had been told that as an intermediate learner, it was important to break through into this native material to try and improve her reading comprehension even further. And she was really struggling with that. She actually went as far to say she really hated reading those news articles. And the final part of her routine was on the bus to work every morning, she'd pop in the headphones and have a listen to an MP3 recording that she had of the graded readers that she was reading in order to kind of review passively the vocabulary and the phrases and she had learned from that. Because she's got a full-time job and she's really busy, she's not actually that consistent with this. This isn't something that happens every day. And what she found was, although her comprehension skills were getting better, and she felt that comprehension wasn't really too much of an issue, she was understanding what she was listening and reading to, when she spoke, all these useful phrases and vocabulary that she had learned from this input, she just didn't really have any way of getting it out in the conversation. She'd really struggle with using it in context with native speakers. What I took from this conversation was that there were 3 gaping holes in her routine that didn't quite align with the goal that she had mentioned to get fluent and to be able to have conversation in the language. The first of which was, she didn't actually mention any kind of speaking practice, which is a vital ingredient in order to get good at speaking, right? And secondly, she said she was struggling to recall vocab and phrases when she was having conversations, but there was no kind of, apart from re-listening to things and rereading things, there was no actual kind of knowledge retention in place, nothing to bridge the gap between input and output, nothing to move this vocabulary from passive to active. effective. And the final gaping hole was a lack of any kind of habit formation. So she mentioned that these weren't things she was doing consistently. She was doing them as and when she could, which is fair enough. But in order to make sure that you're getting consistent, dedicated practice, then obviously you need to make that a habit so that you can stick to it long term and do it every day consistently. And then I asked her another question. If you were as disciplined as you possibly could be with your full-time job and with your current commitments and your life and your lifestyle, what is the maximum amount of time per day that you could dedicate to active study of Mandarin? And she replied to me, with all her commitments and other things that she's got going on in life, the maximum time she could commit a day to learning Mandarin would be about 1 hour. And so I replied, right, we've got 1 hour to work with. First of all, let's just scrap that 20 minutes a day that you've been telling me that you've been spending trawling through articles that aren't really relevant to you and are a bit too difficult for you and causing you a lot of frustration and stress. Well, first of all, she probably wouldn't be reading articles like that in English. Secondly, going back to her goals were not to become so good at reading finance articles that she was going to write the next finance textbook in Mandarin. The kind of phrases and vocab and sentence structure contained in these articles probably wasn't too applicable to the colloquial style of Mandarin that she wanted to achieve in order to have conversations with natives. So we set out to tackle the next problem, which was not really being able to remember things when you needed to be able to recall them effectively. First of all, I allocated her 20 minutes of her 1 hour of study time to read her graded readers, and I asked her why she was reading these graded readers, to make a note of any words or phrases that she thought were particularly useful, ideally noting down the entire sentence, but not to the point where it was affecting her enjoyment of the material, or to the point that it's just getting in the way that she's noting down everything. And then I asked her to put a maximum of 5 sentences a day, so something like 3 to 5 sentences a day, into Anki to review, and to get up 10 minutes earlier each day to spend 10 minutes on Anki just reviewing the flashcards that she had added in. For anyone who wants to know a bit more about how I tend to use Anki for learning languages, you can check it out. I've got a whole playlist explaining it in a bit more detail. So far this took us to half an hour a day, roughly, maybe a bit more, a bit less, depending on the amount of Anki flashcards and other factors. And the remaining half an hour we decided to use to target the other gaping hole, which was speaking. So the first thing I did again was to get her to download in there and then a couple of language exchange apps to see which one she got on with better. So I got her to download iTalki, HelloTalk and Tandem. And so I set her the goal of over the next week to reach out to 3 native speakers to try and arrange times to have language exchange. And to help with this, I wrote her, we sat down and wrote a paragraph together explaining her goals and what she wanted from the language exchange in Mandarin so that it would be easy for the native speakers to understand. Now, obviously, unless she was going to be very lucky and find a ton of language exchange partners that were free at times that she wanted all the time, there was no way she was going to be able to fill that half an hour every day with just speaking practice. So what I said to her was that I was going to give her 2 alternative little habits that were going to be used to fill that half an hour in the case that she wasn't able to have a conversation with a native speaker to fill that time. The first of which was to listen to more conversational Chinese podcasts, because one of the things we noticed earlier that was kind of lacking in her routine was a source of good conversational Mandarin. Like, graded readers aren't quite the same way that Mandarin's spoken. So in order to kind of get to grips with what proper spoken Mandarin sounds like to help her with conversations down the line, I recommended that she goes to some of the more common intermediate podcasts to help her with that. And secondly, I set her a little bit of homework to do on the days where she wasn't speaking to native speakers, and that was I would give her a sentence pattern. Now, there are loads of sentence patterns in Mandarin, right? So something like 因为所以虽然但是哪怕也, like all of these are sentence patterns and can be used to express so many ideas. Now, a lot of people struggle to be able to use these actively in conversation to express what they're trying to say. So I would, every day that she wasn't speaking to someone, we agreed that I would send her a sentence pattern and she would send me 3 sentences back that she had constructed on her own using those sentence patterns, and I would get them corrected for her by a native speaker. At this point, although she was feeling a lot more confident about exactly where she was going to be going, it was still quite confusing. We've got a load of new habits that we need to form. So we sat down and we took out her calendar, and my friend wrote out exactly what she was going to be doing each day and the time slots that she had allocated to doing it. Now, I know this sounds quite patronising, but in reality this is a really, really good way in order to increase the likelihood that you will stick to a habit and form it successfully. So for example, she wrote down that every day she was going to get up 10 minutes earlier to do her Anki. She also wrote down that in the evening she was going to spend 20 minutes and a bit more time extra for the Anki sentences as well of reading her graded readers, and then the other half an hour for speaking practice. So I feel you guys can use a similar framework in order to improve if you're feeling like you're struggling with Mandarin. So first of all, you can ask yourself, where would you like to be in 5 years' time? And once you've got this clear goal, you can then work towards it by identifying the barriers that you have that are stopping you getting there. What are your biggest problems in Mandarin? And then from there, you need to analyze your routine. What are you already doing and what could you be doing? So there's this principle that about 20% of what we do actually accounts for 80% of the results. So what you want to try and do is focus as much effort as you can on the 20% that's really bringing the results for you and to help you reach your goals. So for some people that might be that they want to get really good at reading, in which case loads of speaking practice probably isn't the solution to get really good at reading, but it also works the other way around. And then from there, you want to implement specific solutions in order to solve those problems. And you'll notice that when my friend and I were building her routine, we made it really specific, and it was really small goals in order to make it actually achievable. So don't write something down ridiculous in your calendar like, I'm going to watch 5 hours of Chinese drama that I'm struggling to understand. That's not a realistic goal, and it's not really going to be benefiting you as much as something really simple and specific that you can actually achieve. Alright guys, so that brings us to the end of this video. I really hope that it's helped kind of seeing how to not necessarily fix, how to kind of implement a language learning routine for your specific goals. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know how you're feeling with your Mandarin learning journey. If any of this has helped at all, I really hope it has. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, bye for now. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video. If you want to learn how to speak fluent Chinese but you aren't too sure how to go about it, you might want to go and check out my free newsletter on peakmandarin.com. Run by me and my friend Misha, the Peak Mandarin newsletter offers practical tips and techniques to solve all your biggest Mandarin speaking problems. It's based on what we did to become fluent in the language and what we wish our teachers had told us at a lower level. Subscribe now and we'll also send you a free copy of our 50-page ebook telling the story of exactly how we taught ourselves to speak fluent Chinese while working and studying full-time in the UK. If you're interested, you can sign up on peakmandarin.com or click the link in the description below. Bye for now.